my blanket. So I'm going to set up for seated breath work. So I'm just going to come to my seat, elevate a little bit off of the floor. So this allows us to kind of tip ourselves, right? If we get that seat right underneath our sitting bones, we can come to this place where the pelvis kind of tips forward a bit, and we can come into this Sukhasana, easy seated pose or seated pose. And we're just gonna practice breath here for a few minutes before we move into the rest of practice. So if you're just joining, don't worry, come in, find your seat, and kind of settle. I like to use breath work, if you've not been in the class with me, live and in person, when we used to be able to do those sorts of things. Seems like a long time ago. I like to start class with a little breath work because it gives us some space, right? Whatever has preceded this moment in your day, whether you're watching live or later recorded, just an opportunity to kind of come in to your own body, find your own space, and mark this time off as separate from all the things that have preceded it and whatever might come after this time, these 45 minutes that we get to spend together. So come into your seat and find that nice downward, right, gravitational pull through the sitting bones, down into your base, whatever you're sitting on, down into the floor and earthward. And then soften, right? So we soften the abdominals and we find a softness to the front of the body and the sides of the body and the back of the body. If we come into this gravitational alignment, we can just let the bones stack, and we can find ourselves in this nice soft place where we can observe the breath. So just bring that awareness in. It's okay to still be settling and coming into this space, and then follow the breath. So stream the breath through the nose. Inhale, exhale. So before we do anything with the breath, we're just going to observe where it is in the body. So take an observation of the breath as it streams in through the nose, down through the back of the throat and into the lungs. And we feel that expansion through the abdominals and through the rib cage, and that lift in the sternum. And then the exhale releases and softens, right? We let all of that pass back through, out through the nasal passage. So a couple more breaths just here, kind of in this entry point to practice, where we lower our expectations and we just observe the breath as it is in the body. And then after a few of those sort of smooth and steady baseline breaths, we're going to, it's been a bit windy today, and the weather has been a bit topsy-turvy. And so we're going to focus on exhale today through our breath work, because focusing on exhale and an emphasis on the exhale brings a grounding quality to the mind and to the body. So on your next exhale, see if you can draw out that exhale a little bit longer. So if your standard exhale was a couple seconds or a few seconds in duration, see if you can stretch that out a little bit farther. And then let the inhale rebound from that place of almost or fully empty lungs. And let the inhale stay just as it is. And again, focus on the exhale. See if you can elongate that exhale a little bit longer by a couple seconds or a couple counts if you're counting. And then remember to keep everything soft. So even while we breathe, right, we want to keep the front body soft. And even as we think about the duration of the breath and the effort and the work of the breath, we want to keep the mind soft. Keep the face soft. And each exhale is a chance to feel that descending gravitational pull down, settling downward toward the earth. And just a couple more breaths on this emphasis on the exhale, breath pattern. And when you come to your next exhale, one more time, let that exhale slowly slip out, smooth and steady until you kind of reach that fully exhaled point with the lungs. And then on your next inhale, we'll just return that breath to its natural state. So just let the inhale and the exhale kind of even out. And come back to that breath as it was before we placed an emphasis on the exhale. And observe, right? See if you can kind of be this external observer up here somewhere. Well, the quality of the breath after that emphasis on the exhale, and see if it's shifted, right? What it looks like and feels like now. Go ahead, if you've closed your eyes, as I tend to do when I go into breath work, go ahead and crack those eyes open slowly. Let the light come back in. And then we're going to unfold. So if you were seated, if you were laying, I gave the option, right? If you wanted to do this breath work lying down, which you absolutely could do. If you're laying, you'll bend your knees and start to kind of come back, roll to your side and press into the floor and come back up. If you were sitting, then we'll kind of unfold ourselves. So use your hands, bring those knees in, extend forward. We'll come off of that seat if you were sitting up on a block or a set of blankets. Extend those legs and sort of give them a little bit of a shake. All right, great. So if you've joined since we started breath work, good to have you here. We're going to clear these props out of the way. And we're going to come to face our mats. And we're going to move into directly into spinal waves. So we're going to come to face our mat. Come to all four. And press those palms into the mat. So I'm really spreading my hands, right? So we want to have space. These are like downward dog hands. We want to spread the fingers and get that palm really spread. The shoulders are over the wrists. The hips are over the knees. And then we're going to move through, since we're focusing on kind of our forward and back bending patterns today, we're going to focus on just the first variation of spinal wave, which has us flexing and extending the spine. And so we're going to move with the breath and start on an exhale. As I begin to exhale the breath, I'm going to tip the tailbone toward the floor, and then the lumbar spine presses, and then the thoracic spine presses toward the ceiling, and then ultimately my head drops. And I really press into these palms. There's this little bit of this backward movement through the pose, right? I kind of push myself back toward my heels and really draw that navel up and in as we flex the spine, and then we inhale and begin again at the tailbone. Tailbone lifts, spine extends forward. See if you can sink into those shoulders, right? You want to create that valley between the shoulder blades, and then we're going to extend forward. We're careful not to look up, up, and away, but this is a forward motion, so it's really head forward through extension. And then back we go. We start with the exhale, the tailbone tips. We press the spine up toward the ceiling. We're going really slow because this nice slow motion moves us through piece by piece. We want to see if we can move the spine in segments instead of in one big piece, and articulate through. So keep going through and just link your breath to this motion as you tip the tailbone and press the spine up. You exhale completely, and then as the tailbone lifts and the spine moves forward, you inhale forward through extension. And just a couple more. We'll just take 2 more cycles through. Got that motion all the way through the spine, all the way down the line of your mat. And as you come through your last extension, we'll pause. And so from here, we're going to take ourselves over. We're going to come over to our back onto the mat. And if you have a belt handy, right, if you have a yoga strap, or you have a belt, an actual belt, or anything else that can stand in, right? If you can make a loop, awesome. If you can't, you can always just take the tails of a strap and hold it, right, as is. I've got a loop in my belt. We're going to go to Supta Padangusthasana, which is a leg release, back of the leg release. So I'm going to loop my foot at the ball of the foot, and I'm going to lay back and press my foot with the strap on it up toward the ceiling. But I'm not going to ignore my leg on the floor either, right? I'm going to engage, so I have gluteal engagement through the leg floor, and I'm pressing out, right, as if I could stand into the wall that's down there at the other end and stand that foot into that wall. So all of this, my left side of the body, which is on the floor, is active all the way down through that leg. And then right leg, my right leg, is looped, and I'm pressing up, right, like it's a gas pedal. Press through that strap so that the ball of the foot is leading. It's the highest point up toward that ceiling. And we're not going to open to the left, or we're not going to open to the right. We're not going to cross the leg because, again, we're interested in this relationship, right? This forward and back, forward bending and back bending. So this is, a forward bend at the hip. And so press up through that foot, breathe through. You should be feeling back of the right leg, so that hamstring gets a chance to stretch and release. And this is a great counter to a lot of our other activities, maybe running and walking and biking, gardening, any of those other outdoor activities we've been able to partake in. And just check this leg. Sometimes this leg, because we're holding it, it could migrate toward the midline and be more over the middle of the body. So just be sure that this leg is coming straight up out of this hip. Go ahead and release that foot. Lower, 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 down that leg comes. And before we move on, we're just going to observe, right? We take this moment and we check, how does the right side feel versus the left side? Because we're interested in those sorts of things in yoga. Right side, to me, feels a little longer, flatter. So we're going to take the left side now, so loop that left foot. And if you don't have a belt or a strap, I didn't show this on the other side, sorry that I didn't. But if you don't have a strap at all, you can just take the back of the leg, right? Wherever the leg is, if it's somewhere out here or if the knee is bent, the goal is hamstring stretch. So you can gently take the leg, right? We're not trying to reef on the leg, but you can gently take the leg and draw it toward the torso and find that hamstring stretch. If you've got a strap, though, it's a great tool, or if you're beyond the strap, right? If you're all the way here, hand to big toe, which is the final pose, then great. The strap is this great interim piece. It allows us to press up through the ball of that foot, activate this leg now. This right leg is on the floor, so the glutes are active, and all the way down through this leg, I have standing leg energy pressing out through that foot. And then again, right, we soften the face and the throat, right? We don't clench the jaw here. We breathe through and feel predominantly, right? This is hamstring stretch on the back of the left leg. So we breathe through that stretch. And after we're here for some time, you might find that this hamstring has lengthened a bit, and maybe you can, on the last couple breaths, maybe the leg can melt in a little more toward the torso, maybe, or if the knee was bent to start, maybe you can find a little more extension behind the back of the knee, gently pressing through all the way up. Release the strap, lower the left leg, and we observe, right? Again, before we move on too quickly, we observe left side, right side, and feel how that has integrated into the body. All right, we're going to come back up. So bend those knees, roll on over. We're going to come back to face our mat, and we're going to use a child's pose to find our distance for downward dog. So we're going to prepare to go up into downward dog. And I like to use this child's pose expanse to kind of measure out on my mat what my distance is for downward dog. So I'm going to go ahead and take toes together, knees apart, press back into child's pose, and extend those hands out in a way, right? So I'm really thinking about length. I'm starting to already think about the length and strength of the side body that I need in Adho Mukha Svanasana, the downward facing dog. So I'm really extending out. My forehead can ground into the mat. And use the breath here, nice full breath, to really find some stretch on the back. All those little muscles along the spine get a stretch, and I'm really pressing, right? Those arms are active in this child's pose to really start to feel the length and strength of the side body. And then I'm going to press my palms into the mat, come away from my heels, turn the toes toward the mat, and up and back. I'm going to start in downward dog with my knees bent, because this just ensures that I got this nice tip of the pelvis and extension in the spine. And here, right here it is, right, this nice long line all the way up this arm into the shoulder and up into the side body, nice and strong. And then if you can absolutely stay here on bent knees, or if you're interested, you can extend the knees and you're way high up on your toes. So you can keep that pelvis tipping forward and that spine cascading down and out of the pelvis. And then last little adjustment. Now I'm going to press my heels toward the floor, in the direction of the floor, right? No expectation that they go to the floor. Mine are close, but they're not quite there, and that's fine. But press those heels in the direction of the floor. Whether they make contact or not, the heels are rooting, pressing down toward the mat, down toward the floor, and really stretch the mat between palms and feet. And then go ahead, bring both knees down to the mat. And just come off of those hands, right? That was a long, active time out through those hands and those arms. So take a little break off of those hands. All right, we're gonna use downward dog now as a transition up off of the mat into Uttanasana, forward fold. And then walk that Uttanasana facing forward. If you have a block, now would be a great time to have it close, or whatever you might be using as a block. Feel free to grab it and bring it in. And just have it close by, because we'll pull it in for forward fold and for the Christy RYT Padottanasana, which is the wide leg forward fold. So I'm just going to come back and stretch out on my mat, find my distance again. Come away from my heels, press up and back into downward dog. Find that extension in the spine. Maybe you want to carry that extension through the spine into forward fold. So I'm going to walk, walk, walk. Hands and feet walk toward each other. And I find myself in this place, right? Maybe hands are on the floor. Maybe it's a bit of a stretch, so we bring in the block. We would use the block, right, on any level so that we can find extension in the spine, right? That same extension we had in child's pose and in downward dog, we want to be able to find an element of it here in forward fold. So we're not looking for this place where we're sort of rounded and domed, but extended as we fold forward. And sometimes a really great way to find that is to find this element of downward dog in Uttanasana, in forward fold. So if you take your hands and you walk them out away, away, away from you, you feel that same stretch, right? This long line along the arm and up into the side body. And you feel that extension. And then you try to keep the spine, right, nice and extended as it is, and just walk the hands back to whatever size prop or to the floor, and keep that extension, right? Both hamstrings stretch. And if that's too much, then you bend the knees and bring those, like the ribs are supposed to be close to the thigh. And forward fold. And then to come up and out, I'm going to sit my sitting bones back. And I'm going to press down into the feet. And up we come. Pause a moment here in Tadasana. If you want to face front, go ahead. And pause in Tadasana. And take this observation point where we get to say, how has the practice landed in the body so far, and with the breath. And then we're going to step wide. So I'm going to take my block out in front of my mat, step the legs wide. The edges of your feet are parallel to the short edges of your mat, right? So you have this toes all pointing forward. And we're just going to take a nice inhale. Find all the length, right? All the length when we were sitting and seated, breath work at the beginning that we had, rising up out of our pelvis. We want to find that here. We find that length in the spine, and then we exhale, fold forward, forward, forward. And then we can take the same experiment here. We can walk the hands forward, while the sitting bones are attracted to what's behind you, then you kind of have this downward dog or child's pose essence in wide leg forward fold. And we go, oh yes, that's what the spine feels like. It feels extended, like it's moving forward, cascading out of the pelvis. Press into the outer edges of both feet, right? So it's the outer edges that we kind of roll out and press through the outer edges of the feet, stretching the mat between the feet. Arches are lifted, and then, right, you have all that extension in the spine with the arms walked out. Can you keep that extension in the spine and just reposition the arms? Even if that means that you come to a block, just bring those arms back under the shoulders. Press into the floor, press into your block, but try to keep that drawn out, stretched out, extended nature of the spine. And go ahead, press into the floor or into your block, parallel your back to the floor. I'm going to heel toe in a little bit, walk my feet in a little, so not quite so wide leg, and then I'm going to take my hands to my hips and inhale and I come. Now we're going to come down in the same way that we came up, right? So I'm going to turn to my side. We're going to forward fold into a downward dog. End up back on the floor for a couple floor level bridge and Shalabhasana before we find ourselves in Shavasana. All right, so I'm going to inhale my arms up. I'm going to exhale and fold forward, 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 right. This is forward fold. We're going forward all the way we can before we fold toward the floor. So find yourself in Uttanasana. And then bend the knees, walk the hands out, walk the feet back. And find ourselves in downward facing dog, Adho Mukha Svanasana. Right, and there it is again, that extended spine and those strong side bodies down integrated into our shoulders, down into our arms, pressing into the mat. And then we're going to come forward. It's okay on your wrists, you can stay up for plank. If you need to transition down onto forearms, you can make that transition down into plank. A little core work here. Draw that navel up to the spine, up and in, which supports the pose from beneath. And then both knees down to the mat. Before we take our next pose, if you've got a blanket handy, if you're on carpet, you're probably fine. But if you'd like a little extra cushion, or if your mat is on hardwood or tile or something at home, you're definitely going to want a little blanket for cushion on the front hips. So I'm going to take my blanket, place it over sort of the middle of my mat, and we're going to head toward locust or Shalabhasana. So I'm going to come with my hips, so hip bones into the blanket if you're using a blanket for cushion. And before we stretch back, we want to go forward. So we can create some length in the spine before we lift up into Shalabhasana. And this helps tremendously with the back bends to find length along the spine before you try to bend it. Really, in either direction, it's extension, which creates space to allow the spine to flex and extend. So go ahead to start. My elbows are going to drop straight down from my shoulders. I've got this great traction on my sticky mat. So I'm going to use that. I'm going to pull along the mat, which kind of pulls me forward and creates length here and some space in the back. And then from that space, or from that kind of prep pose, I'm going to go ahead and we're just going to go arms first. Gaze can be low, right? You keep your eyes looking down at the mat. Squeeze, kind of press those shoulder blades together on the back body. Breathe. Fingertips are drawn toward what's behind you. And then release. Go ahead. Forehead into the hands. And release all that energy. So just forehead down into the backs of the hands for a moment. A couple breaths there. And then when you're ready, we'll set back up. And again, don't forget, take that pre-pose, that preparatory option to find extension in the spine before. I'm going to take a breath, I inhale, and I find this length. I pull along my sticky mat and find length. And then from that place, peel back. You can just go with arms, or this time if you like, you can lift feet and press everything back, right? Shoulder blades pull in, fingertips press toward what's behind you. Breathe, breathe. Keep the neck nice and long. Go ahead, release everything to the floor. Okay, breaths into the floor. We'll come up and back. And we're going to come over onto our backs. Keep that blanket close by. You might want a nice head pillow in Shavasana in a couple minutes. And we're going to come onto our backs. The other thing I'm going to have close is my block. And if you don't have your block, but you had a blanket, you could kind of roll your blanket and use it in this little supported bridge that we're going to take. So I'm going to come onto my back and walk my feet in and take my block or blanket if you have that instead. Press up and away and bring the block in just to the back of the sacrum. So that's the back of the pelvis, right? Not the tailbone and not up in the spine, but the back of the sacrum, right in between. And so this is bridge, but this is on the soft restorative side, right? This is supported. All your weight releases into the block or into the blanket. And you get this nice extension through the spine. And release, right? And just soften. We're starting to kind of soften ourselves towards Shavasana. So the breath slows a little here. Heart is overhead, right? So when the head goes below the heart, we start to move in that direction of calm. And then go ahead, lift just enough to take the block or the blanket out, slide that out. And then this is a really slow, deliberate motion. So we're starting up high in the high spine where we're touched down. And we're going to slowly roll the spine down to the floor. Roll, roll, roll slowly until the tailbone touches down. And then you have all this contact with the mat, which is really nice. And then last little item to check off the checklist before we come down into Shavasana. I'm taking, it's supine pigeon, right? So I'm crossing left leg over right I'm drawing my right leg in. And you can, if you would like, if you want to thread your hands back here and hold the right leg and pull it in, you can. I'm just taking a bit of a more gentle approach today. So I'm taking my heel and my knee, and I'm letting the right leg do the work. Instead of me pulling the right leg in, I'm just gonna kind of cradle my left leg and draw that right leg in until I get this melting on the left outer hip. I'm not going to be aggressive about it today. Overly aggressive. Unwind. Other side, right leg crosses left. Draw that left leg in. Again, I'm going to take my heel and my knee. I'm not pressing, I'm not pulling, I'm just bracing. And I'm going to draw the left leg in so I get right glutes release. Breathe through. Then release all of that. Feet come to the floor. And just where you are, if your blanket is close enough to reach it, or the props that you want to pull in for Shavasana, with all that contact you have through the spine, you can absolutely just pull in your blanket, extend your legs, and release into Shavasana. If you wish that you had some other props, then just bring yourself up. Grab a layer, if you wish you had another layer on or another blanket. Pull those in and bring them on and get yourself resettled for Shavasana. You're still settling in. Go ahead, keep settling. I'm going to sit while you're in Shavasana. So settle in. Release all the work of practice. Release all the effort of the day. And just let go of any holding, right? You scan the body, head to toe, searching for any holding or bracing. And just invite those places to soften. So the toes melt off to the left and the right. All the muscles along the legs release. The back of the pelvis settles real even and grounds into the mat. There's always that little skip in the low back. And then a touchdown again in the thoracic spine. Right above the heart and the lungs, right? There's this pool of the body that presses in again to the mat and to the floor. The arms are heavy and yield into the mat. And yield the back of the skull into your blanket or into your mat. Get the sensation that the whole back line of the body is smudged. That there's the line between you and the earth is softened. And release. And let go. Soften your features on your face, your eyes soften, your jaw releases. As we come back from Shavasana, let's come back first through your next breath. Let your breath be your entry point back to your mat, back to the room. And let that awareness spread from the breath out through the body to the hands and the feet. You can bend your elbows and bring the hands into the torso. And one knee and then the other. And then when you're ready, roll to one side. Support your head. Round your back. And then press into the floor, bringing yourself back up to sitting. Bring your hands together in front of your heart. In acknowledgement and gratitude for time taken and space created. Namaste. Thank you so much for joining. It's great to have a few of you out there. And if I couldn't see you, I could feel your presence. So I'll be on for the next couple Tuesdays and hope to have you back, and we'll keep building from here. And sometime soon, back to in person in some format, outside or some way or another. But if you haven't yet, it'd be great if you could go over to the Assisi website, Assisi Institute website, and make a donation. Any amount for today's class would be appreciated. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day.